Another week, another episode of the Smoke-Filled Room. Really glad you're here with us. We've got a role reversal. I'm on the road yet again. I'm in Sarasota this week doing a bunch of work. So I'm in the hotel room. I decided instead of having you guys look at my bed in the background, which is not made because it's me, I'd be over here against the wall. So I've got a boring background like Michael Butler. So no one confuse me with Michael Butler. I know we look a lot alike. We sound a lot alike. We've got both the same horrible backgrounds. I think the more of these episodes we do, I'm just turning more into Michael. So I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. Maybe I'll start to build a fan club like you, Michael.
All right. Good luck.
But Chris has thrown us all for a loop. He's got the cool background back there with the flag and the tree, and so he's gotten a little more professional in the background. So we're all switching roles this week. But I'm really glad to be here. We've got some really interesting things to cover. So I'm glad to have Abby and Chris and Matt and Michael with us. We're going to jump right into what is a topic that's dominated, not the political news, but really just the news in the world. But of course, there's a giant political angle here in the state of Illinois. I'm assuming that our watchers, if you're watching this, you're pretty informed. I don't have to tell you that Hamas has invaded Israel, and thousands on both sides, but thousands have been wounded, killed. It is a atrocity. It's a horrible, horrible situation. We're not a news org, so we're not going to dive into what happened. Other organizations, other outlets can do that, and there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot of horrors there. There's a lot of anger there, rightful, righteous anger. And I'm sure we'd all love to get into it, but you don't watch this for news and for news opinion. You watch it for politics. So we got to tell you about why this matters politically, especially in the state of Illinois. We're going to bring up on screen a couple examples of a letter that 16 Illinois Democrats signed and pushed out immediately after this happened, calling for de-escalation and peace. And from that letter, let me quote so I don't get this wrong: "We will not be able to achieve peace when millions of Palestinians are denied basic human rights. We urge the United States and the international community to work towards long-term solutions that end the inequality that is the root cause of the violence." So right after Hamas launches a surprise attack, murders innocent civilians, parades dead civilians through the streets, there's rape, there's murder, there are just human rights atrocities. 16 Illinois Democrats saw fit to put out a statement that can only be described as backing Hamas's efforts and Palestinians over Israel. And it just, I guess I could go on and on about how I think this is absolutely, utterly ridiculous, but this is about the political impact. And so what we're looking at now is a whole bunch of Democrats, 16 of them, including some in some pretty challenging races for them to hold on to in this upcoming election, have taken a pretty significant stance on a major world news, world happening, if you will. So let me start there. Sure, we're going to have some follow-up thoughts, some follow-up questions here, but any initial thoughts just on that?
I mean, what's interesting to me is that not just these folks that signed the letter, but you see it with progressives across the country that this has kind of become their niche issue. Like, okay, this is the thing, we're against Israel, or we're pro Hamas, however you want to frame it. So I find it very interesting that they're inserting themselves into a thing that really doesn't have anything to do with the job they're supposed to be doing. Like, what do the people of Illinois actually care about? I mean, obviously there's people with families and stuff over in Israel, but how does this impact their day-to-day lives of, these state house seats? So it's interesting that they're going out and doing this right now.
And then you have like Black Lives Matter Chicago. They tweeted out this image of like the paraglider into where they paraglided into this concert and killed all these innocent people. And they post a picture of that and say, "I stand with Palestine." It's just absolutely absurd. Like it's very easy to be on the right side of history here. Just be on the right side of history. This is just despicable.
Well, honestly, there are many times where we see conservatives or Republicans or Americans do things that, that's our team, and so we want to back them, but they were wrong. What I don't understand, and I know I see this through my own personal perspective, But I don't know how you can spin what Hamas did as good. I just don't know how you can spin that as a good thing, even if you support the Palestinian state. If you want, what's the phrase that's been out there? I don't want to repeat it. Never mind. If this is something you support, how do you support what Hamas just did as being right? And I think that's where we are with the tribalism in our politics, where, you know what, if you support what happened, or you support the Palestinian state, but you kind of have an idea that this shouldn't have happened, maybe just shut your mouth. Maybe just let this pitch fly by. You don't need to swing at every pitch. And I just don't know how you in any way spin this as something that's a positive thing.
Well, and Colin, you're completely right. I mean, us five on the call, we're as political as you can get. And I know that everything that happens, we try and view it politically. But when I saw the news about this, I didn't think about politics relating to this until people asked me the political impact of it. My first thought was, oh my gosh, so many innocent people, civilians, not even army men, not even people who were in the fight, innocent men, women, children were being ripped apart limb from limb. I didn't even think about the political implications. And it's sad that when you see these leaders, the first thought that they have is, how can we spin this to have our own political agenda pushed forward? It's like, stop. We shouldn't even be thinking about that. We should just be mourning the loss of life and being sad for people overseas instead of trying to push our agenda in every little thing. And that's why I think people like Rep Syed and the other 15 or so that signed on to this letter, it's just poor taste. Even if you would agree with them on parts of this letter, I just think it's terrible timing and terrible taste for a leader to do.
Well, but listen to this. I agree. And when you think about after a tragedy, there are two types of people. The people who say, yeah, we need to talk about changes, but right now people are hurting. Let's not step on what they're dealing with. And there are people who immediately rush to social media to push their political agenda. And these people we're talking about are the types to immediately rush to social media to push their agenda. If there's a school shooting, if there's a something that in some way fits with what the narrative they want to talk about, there's no, hey, guess what? This is a human rights thing. This is bigger than politics. To your point, Matt. I mean, I'm scrolling through Twitter as this news is breaking, and I was floored. It brought a tear to my eye. I felt awful, and I wanted to go. I mean, I am not the toughest person on the planet. I'm a doughy white boy. I wanted to go put on army boots and head to the Middle East and do what I could to help out. I mean, it's like, this is just awful. And these are women and kids and 12 Americans, which I want to talk about. And just how do you just immediately rush to politics? But that's who these people are.
So I want to comment on the letter. One of the first things that was interesting to me is that one of the signees of one of the 16 was Senator Ram Villaham. I never know how to pronounce his name. He's a north side state senator. He also signed the Jewish caucus letter that said, we stand with Israel and condemn the attack. So that was a really interesting political maneuver on his part that he signed both letters. But the other thing I kind of want to touch on, specifically related to Republican politics and demographic politics, is that over the past several years, I've heard many Republicans, especially in my neck of the woods, talk about the need to reach out to many Arab Americans, Palestinian Americans, because we see them as natural allies. They're a conservative ethnic group. They hold many of the same social conservative positions that we do. And many of them are business owners, so they seem like a logical fit for the party. However, oftentimes in instances like this, it's very difficult for the Republican Party to ever appeal to these people, because the Israel-Palestine conflict to Palestinian Americans is a big, big thing. Many of them live here in the United States because of the conflict going on between Israel and Palestine. So while I certainly agree that, what's happening in Israel right now is a tragedy, and the way the 16 representatives and senators handled this was very poorly, I do think that the Republican Party needs to take consideration into, if the Republican Party wants to get Palestinian voters, there's going to have to be some understanding on their end, on their side of the issue with the Palestinian conflict, because to get those voters, you can't just fully take Israel's side. Simple.
Well, Chris, I think it's a good informational part that we should give to our audience, which is the population of Arab Americans in Illinois is pretty much exclusively packed in your region. It's 90% in the Chicago metropolitan area. When you look at the heat map, which I'm looking at from our data team, and it's Palos, it's Orland, so when you say it's mostly in your region, or the reason why you see it. We don't see this in Lake. We don't see this too much. A little bit in DuPage, but not too much. You certainly don't see it beyond that. And I don't even see it in like Northern Cook in terms of outreach to Arab Americans, because the population isn't as dense. But in your region, that's where it's really dense. And so it makes sense why there'd be efforts to reach out to Arab Americans in the South Burbs there in Southern Cook. So just a point of, I think, information for our audience if they weren't aware of that fact.
And
Well,
Chris,
on
on
the-
the flip side of that, you have, I think me and Abby were going on the same train of thought here, is you have a large portion of the Jewish population that's inherently very conservative, but they don't vote Republican. You see people like in my neck of the woods, like Brad Schneider, who's kind of a champion for Jewish communities, yet he's as liberal as you can be. And I think that this is a winning issue for Republicans because the Jewish communities tend to side with us on this issue. And like a lot of different ethnic groups, they're inherently more conservative just because of their religious background. And I think, I don't want to say Republicans can capitalize on it, but we can find common ground with Jewish communities.
Well, I mean, let's not go too far. I mean, the Jewish households vote very strongly Democratic. So I don't know that they are super conservative. I think they're super, they're in some cases can tend to be more religious, sometimes not, but that does not equal conservative. So I'll push back a little bit on that point.
Yeah, I would
Yeah,
agree
I
with
was actually
Colin.
going to make,
I would
Chris,
agree
I
with
was actually
Colin.
going to make an,
Go ahead, Oliver.
Go ahead.
I'm happily talking over Chris. But Dre, to your point, I was actually going to go with Colin's line of thinking is that Jewish voters tend to be more Democratic, and so it just feels like an unforced error from a lot of these Democrats who are signing on to this letter because again, these are people. This is a constituent of voters that already is with you, and you're getting yourself into a hotly contested political issue that it's people don't feel strongly about it. So to me, it's like there's no margin for them to do it other than to, like Colin's saying, maybe push their own political agenda.
By conservative, I'll clarify. I meant on specific issues, very family oriented, have a large respect for tradition. Also, they tend to economically be more fiscally responsible. On some of the social issues, maybe more liberal, but I think there are parts of Jewish communities that are more conservative than other religious groups.
Yeah, but what my point was going to be, what divide are you going to cause there? Because you already have champions of the Jewish community already in office over there. You have Jan Schakowsky, you have Brad Schneider. So it's going to be very difficult to, wedge that divide on only the Israel issue when the rest of the Jewish voting bloc is going to vote with the Democratic Party.
Let's talk about how you use this. Let's talk about how you step up and make this. If you're Illinois Republicans, which is conservatives, Republicans, that's our audience. How do you make this a thing? How do you make this an issue? There's a number of ways. Let's first give some kudos. I know the state party put out, it's a bit too lengthy, but they put out a press release, they put out a statement. Kudos to Marty McLaughlin, candidate for state rep, who went after his opponent, Maria Peterson, because Nabila Saeed is the campaign co-chair for Maria Peterson, and she was one of the signers of this. So you think about how can you use this? First things first, you call out any Illinois Democrat who has a tie to any of the 16 signers of this, especially anyone who's in a targeted or a tier 1 race, a tier 2 race. Just like McLaughlin did, you're putting press releases out, you're calling them out, demanding an answer on do you agree with this? They need to publicly say whether they agree with these people that they're campaign co-chairs or donors or people that have endorsed them. Do you agree? This is what the Democrats do to us. Make them have to come on the record as either saying they agree or disagree with a fellow Democrat, or make them be hounded by the press and other entities for an answer for days, weeks, months. The left does that to us all the time. We absolutely need to play that game, and it's more than just a press release. So kudos to McLaughlin, the state party. That's a step, but it's got to be more than just a press release. There needs to be meat behind this, labor behind this, money behind this, because that's the next thing. Digital ads, boosted Facebook posts, boosted social media posts. We don't have the money for mailings, and that's fine. But in any community that has a Jewish population above 3-5% of the registered voters in that district, we should be having ads out there hammering on the fact that Illinois Democrats, 16 prominent Illinois Democrats, have publicly backed Hamas in this. You word it how you want to word it, but it doesn't take much to word this in such a way that could make not only any Jewish voters unhappy, But what I've seen is that you go to Buffalo Grove and Highland Park and Skokie and some of these communities that have pretty strong Jewish populations, non-Jewish populations in those regions tend to be very supportive of their neighbors who are Jewish. So I don't know that you just have to hit Jewish households. Simply hitting those districts, those communities, those zip codes, pick what you want to do. I think the message resonates beyond simply Jewish households. I think other than maybe Arab American households, which is less than 1% of the population of the state of Illinois, I don't know that there's anyone that you need to skip with this. I mean, this is a message that makes all Illinois Democrats look bad. And again, when Republicans screw up, Democrats pounce and make us all wear the hat for something that one Republican said, that one conservative said. Here, there's 16 at the state level, and there's more in Chicago. And I'm sure Chris could catch us up on that. Plenty of Democrats did this. This isn't just one. This is a concerted effort. This is more than enough Democrats to say, you don't even have to qualify. Illinois Democrats have said that they support Hamas and in the invasion over Israel. That's it. You don't have to qualify it, because this many Democrats have stepped up. You've got a powerful issue here, and this will move votes. This will move numbers, and you got to make them wear the hat for this.
Well, I think there's also going to be some play here with foreign policy in general, because if you're a candidate for Congress per se, and you're running, you want to run against the Biden administration's current foreign policy. And frankly, part of the reason why this happened is because Iran and Hamas view the United States as weaker now that Trump's out of office and Biden's in office. So there's a play there from a foreign policy perspective in federal races too that I expect to see.
And the $6 billion. I mean, anybody who supported Joe Biden in the election as a Democrat who's a member of Congress, and heck, even below Congress, I'm sure a lot of these state reps and state senators and Chicago people, have made positive comments about Biden. You can then draw the line from that to the $6 billion to Iran to Hamas. I mean, it's not hard to connect those dots and use that as a campaign message. This is going to put national security back in the news, and I don't know how long it lasts. More than likely, this doesn't last all the way through next November to the election. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But Americans are fickle with what we care about. But they care about this now. So jump on this now. And at the very least, weaken your opponent. Get a body blower 6 on your opponent. Maybe you get a good uppercut in there, because this is in the news now, and it's relevant now.
Well, like you said, Colin, I remember a few months ago we were talking about Ukraine, and a lot of people were saying, oh, this is a make or break issue for the next election. So many people are going to flip their votes because of this. And now it's not even in the news, and people don't really care unless it's Congress deciding how much they're going to give. So I think that we need to look at our political environment long term. We don't know what it's going to look like in 6 months or 9 months or a year from now. We got to play the hands that we're given now, and you can't expect that it's going to keep bleeding over when we don't know if it will.
But see, and this is where we don't get into campaign training here on Smoke-Filled Room, but feel free to reach out to us if you want to attend one of our trainings where we talk about the importance of a theme. Because if your theme is that the Democrats in Illinois are crazy far-left progressives, they're not the working-class moderates that the Illinois voters deserve, if that's, some version of that is your theme, then right now this is proof of it. It's not to say that we're going to talk about Hamas for the next 13 months. It's to say that for right now, this is the latest proof that Illinois Democrats are extreme far-left progressives. And then we'll get a new proof tomorrow and the next day and the next day and the next day. That's why you want to have a theme, something powerful like this that you can just hammer home over and over again. And it should be what I said, to be honest, but I'm not the one making those decisions. The state chair, the central committee, and all them make those decisions. But come up with what your theme is, and it can be different than mine. I don't care. But have a theme and pull it together. And right now, today, Hamas invading Israel and the travesties of what's going on there, and the deaths and the just the horribleness of what's happening, and Illinois Democrats supporting that. That's your proof of whatever your theme is for today, and you got to hammer it home. And honestly, even when Bob Morgan up in your region, Matt, was pushing back on those 16 state Democrats, basically listen, if you see your fellow Democrats do something stupid, and your Democrats are good at this, they tend to keep it quiet. They don't tend to take it public. You go like, hey, dude, guys, you text them. What the heck were you thinking? You go on Twitter to attack them. You're incensed by what they just did. Bob Morgan spoke for what a lot of people, I'm sure, on the Democratic Party felt, which is, what the blank were you thinking? When Bob Morgan went to Twitter to attack his fellow Democrats, it's pretty bad.
I don't know how much of that was goodwill from him. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt, but it also could be that a big portion of his district is pretty Jewish, just with parts of Glencoe, Deerfield, Highland Park. So I'd like to think he did it for the right reasons, but he's probably just saving face on a political front.
Probably, but I'm saying when you get out there and you attack your fellow Democrats, the Democrats don't do this like we do as Republicans, where we like to attack each other publicly. They tend to be pretty good about keeping it a little more quiet. So when it's notable when they get up on Twitter and make a point like that, it's certainly worth pointing out. And, honestly, maybe we could take a lesson from the Dems, and maybe when we've got a problem with a fellow Republican, just deal with it privately. But, I don't want to dream too much. All right. Have we, seems like we've covered this topic pretty well, except for the IL-12 angle, which we'll get to next. Everybody good on this? All right, let's shift over to the 12th Congressional District, because a major issue like this, you've got to be sure there's going to be some Bost-Bailey angle. I celebrate when we have an episode where we don't have to talk about Darren Bailey or Mike Bost, but that is not episode 22. We will be covering it here because the Hamas invasion has led to new attacks between Bailey and Bost going both directions. Michael, why don't you lay the groundwork for anybody who doesn't know what's going on, and then we'll dive into it.
Okay, this was also kind of an issue last year in the governor's race because in September of 2022, Darren Bailey spoke to the Palestinian American Club, which is out of the Bridgeview area up by Chicago. And while he was speaking, there was a map behind him that...
Michael, Lane will bring it up on screen, so you can give the quicker explanation.
Yeah, the map just... Israel did not exist, and there were also a couple of communities like Tel Aviv and others that were.
Oh, here, let's just make the point. It had Palestine where Israel is right now. You can see it on the map. That's what he stood in front of. Let's make it easy.
Yeah, that sounds good. So he spoke to this group. He was criticized for it then. This group has also had a speaker that outlined how Israel is a racist country. And they posted a video yesterday of people celebrating the attacks on Israel. So it was a problem. The Bost campaign and the National Republican Congressional Committee attacked Darren for it. And then Darren responded by saying that they were calling his religion into question and that it's another swamp preacher style attack that was, encouraged by consultants or something along those lines. So he's been taking heat for that the past couple of days.
Well, I think what gets missed is it's not just the Palestine. If Lane brings it up a second time here, you can see it's not just the map with Palestine. They say from river to sea, I think is the phrase. But that's also to the right of that, right behind Bailey, is the Palestinian flag. Like, this is not, There isn't just one thing here. There's multiple things here behind him. How does an advanced guy not figure that out? How does Bailey not figure that out and be like, I'm not going up there? I'll give you an example. I went to speak at a Republican group, and they hated rhinos, and fine, I hate that term, but whatever. I wasn't there to deal with that issue, but they had a banner behind me that was a rhino, an endangered species, a rhino in the reticle of like a rifle, and that was right behind me to go up there. And I before they called me up, I'm like, listen, all due respect, if you don't want me to speak because of this, fine, but I can't speak with that behind me. Could you please remove it? And they removed it. You got to have that self-awareness to know that someone's going to snap a photo of you. Who knows who somebody takes that, but I'm not going to have an image of somebody shooting an endangered animal behind me while I speak in a photo. How do you not have that kind of self-awareness? Darren Bailey deserves all the negatives that he's going to get in this campaign, and he got them in the last campaign for that photo. But now with Hamas and Israel and Palestine being in the news right now, it's certainly pretty relevant.
Yeah, and this is where the pro-Israel messaging really shines in a district like IL-12, because, who loves Israel more than Jewish people? White evangelical Christian voters, and the IL-12 is packed with those voters. And this, you're right. This is a great play by the Bost campaign. I remember that the photo came out during the gubernatorial campaign against Bailey. But again, it comes back to my point I made earlier. It's like Bailey did the right thing politically at the time, was trying to appeal to Palestinian voters, and now it's coming back to bite him in a different race. If he thought he was going to run for Congress at the time, that was certainly a terrible, terrible move on his end.
Well, we've talked about this a lot with Darren Bailey. There's just a lot of unforced errors. Like, we can sit there and debate whether, we think we agree with his policy positions, but you've seen this over and over where they make unforced errors and just, running bad campaigns, and stuff like this is totally avoidable, as Colin said. So I think another example.
ask them. They think they run the best campaigns. They think people like Michael and us are the worst, even though, we actually win general elections. But if you ask them, they're the best in the world at this.
I mean, obviously, we're obviously the worst.
I'm just saying that to get Michael in trouble, because I'm sure he'll get tweets and calls and text messages from a comment like that. So I figured I'd give Michael something to do this weekend.
All right, I appreciate it.
But so this is a back and forth. Obviously, Bailey's tried to spin it and attack Bost, right? So Michael, can you give that side of it?
Yeah, I mean, he's claiming that it's kind of an attack on him and his religion. That, they're trying to say that he's not authentic, and then they also kind of had like a swamp angle in there, like, some DC swamp consultant told you to do this, but he hasn't really responded to. I mean, just disavow the group. I mean, it's easy.
Especially after what
they can't, especially now, they can't vote for you. There's not like, there's Palestinians in IL 12 that are gonna, be mad at me. Like, it's a terrible. They deny the existence of Israel. They're anti-Israel. They've had other speakers that are questionable. They posted a video of people celebrating the attacks yesterday. Like, I don't know. It's not that hard.
This is politics 101. To Abby's point, you disavow and you move on. Like, it's the basic crisis comms. This is going to stick with them until they handle it. And at this point,
the thing
it's
is,
always going to stick with them.
They had an opportunity to disavow the group a year ago when Pritzker was hitting them for it. They didn't disavow them then, and they're not disavowing them now. So they're stuck with them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a tactical error. The whole thing is a cluster, but this is an opportunity for Bost. Again, I will clarify. I understand this is a horrible situation that is going on. We're just talking about the politics of it, and this does create a big opportunity for Bost. And Chris is right. I can tell you that one of the best avenues for fundraising when running for Congress is the Jewish community nationwide. From the Republican Jewish Coalition to the networks that were built for years with Sheldon Adelson and others. There's a huge fundraising network of Jewish donors, and I've seen it mobilized for Republican candidates for Congress. And I don't know what Bost's team is or isn't doing here, but there's a direct mail piece being drafted at this moment, a letter to that giant list nationwide. And since the NRCC is backing him, they've got the list. I'm sure the RJC will make access to that list available, and there should be something in mailboxes within the week with a photo of Darren Bailey and with the Palestinian flag and a fundraising appeal. And I guarantee you that he will get check after check after check in the mailbox. Like this, the Bost campaign, this is a gift wrapped in gold. And you couldn't do that letter. I mean, it wasn't relevant before. You could have maybe done that letter before and gotten a few checks. It probably was worth doing then. Now, like, you're gonna get a crap ton of checks. And where are we? I mean, we're into Q4. Q4 is oftentimes the hardest fundraising quarter. So this is your time to capitalize on whatever opportunity you get, because we'll talk later about how they've had a good Q3 on fundraising, but Q4 is always tough. So this is a gift that they should be jumping on, taking advantage of.
Absolutely.
All right. Anything else on aisle 12 specifically on this, Michael, or we got it covered?
We got it, I think.
All right. We talked for a bit last week about the migrant situation in Chicago. It isn't just in Chicago that we're dealing with the migrant situation. And Chris has an update for us on the whatever the heck is going on in Joliet Township and Joliet proper. Give us some insight on what's going on there, buddy.
So I talked briefly about this last week, but in short, the Joliet Township applied for a grant from the state for millions of dollars to go towards migrant housing. And then people got mad at the city of Joliet because people don't know the difference between city and township. And now the county board's involved. It's the whole mess. So Joliet Township had their meeting this week, and they had to move the meeting venue to a big auditorium, gym type space, because there was so many people signing up for public comment.
Wow.
And it was a cluster. The township supervisor in his opening comments made the comment that we are all God's children. That comment was resoundingly booed by the audience, so that was a little comic relief there. But yeah, it's really bad. It doesn't seem like the township is going to rescind the grant money, give back the grant money at this point. Right now, the township supervisor whose name is escaping me at the moment. I apologize. He's starting to point blame at Darcy's Joliet Mayor Terry Darcy's Interminville city administrator. He claims that the city administrator told him to apply for the grant. It's a whole thing. So a lot of finger pointing going on. But the bottom line is that the migrant crisis is, creeping into a lot of different, very deep blue communities. And Joliet is no exception to this. So Joliet's an area that's, historically been very, very Democratic. And, what the Republicans can take advantage of this issue there could lead to some pickup opportunities coming forward.
Well, there's more to this, and I know you got to do this a little bit last week, but even the Park District wasn't told. So the Township told the Park District they wanted access to facilities, and it was they gave them some generic reason, and then the Park District found out that they were actually going to use it for a welcoming center for migrants, and they're like, wait, what? And the Township said that the village was fully on board. The village wasn't. I mean, I looked it up. Angel Contreras is the supervisor, and this is just an absolute cluster and how not to handle government from top to bottom, and again, deserving every challenge that they face. But you're bringing this challenge into the South suburbs, and again, as we've talked about, I've seen more polling every week, and I'm doing some national work this week, and so seeing some of the national polling this week, and the immigration issue is just exploding right now as an issue that may even work in general elections. Again, it's October, so we'll see what next year looks like, but this issue is exploding. I don't know if you're in a Democrat area like Joliet is, or at least mostly Democrat area, bringing this issue in and creating vulnerabilities for yourself that Republicans could use in the upcoming election is not the smartest political play. And this is going to make immigration a hot button issue in that whole region, because everyone there is reading the news, and everyone is worried about migrants coming into Joliet or Joliet Township. If they live 5 towns over, they're worried about it. Guaranteed. They're thinking about it. They're talking about it. They're worried for their families. And this builds on the safety message that's worked to varying degrees for Republicans. And a lot of this builds into our narrative, and it fits right within that. So honestly, the South suburbs and going into Will County and that region, even it's kind of peeking into DuPage a little bit, is a targeted area for Republicans in 2024. So Democrats giving us this gift and creating this opportunity really does create some opportunity for us.
If I want to think long-term here for a moment, I mean, the township election's coming up in 2025. I'm sure that the Democrats are going to move against the incumbent communists, because that's what they are, the incumbent communists during the caucus phase. And if that fails again, that gives Republicans a wide open lane to try and take down this township administration in Joliet Township off of this issue exclusively.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you're not wrong in 25. I'm just saying, look at the map there. There are tier 1 races and tier 2 races in that region in 24. So this is creating more windows of opportunity for Republicans and conservatives in 2024 and 2025.
A migrant crisis aside, I'm just glad that people are showing up to their township government and paying attention. It sucks that it gets to this point for people to show up, but I've been to those township meetings and there's 3 people, including the janitor there. Like, this is cool that people are actually participating in their local government.
Yeah, Darren, I always expect you to either give the joke or the slightly off-color comment, or maybe more than slightly. That was like an actual positive, affirming comment, and I don't. What's up? You seem to be in a much better mood. Did you up your meds? I mean, this is exciting to see you so positive.
I just like local government. That's all the medication I need. That gives me a little kick.
Local government is Matt DeRay's high.
Yes.
That explains a
Hard
lot.
place for Republicans can win in Lake County.
I work with a bunch of nerds.
Oh, yeah.
All right, Chris, you good on Joliet?
Yeah, I'm good.
All right, let's talk about, I don't know, this is a weird topic, but also could be fun and also could be a bit annoying. JB Pritzker. So if you haven't seen this in the news, there's a guy who, for whatever reason, has been stalking JB Pritzker. Seems a little bit, speaking of meds, seems like he's off his meds. Threw some giant boulders or giant stones through Pritzker's windows, got arrested. There's a whole story here, and I think there's a couple things to cover. So there's the stalking itself. Pritzker, of course, because he's JB Pritzker, found some way to blame this all on Republicans. We'll get into that in a second. But it just seems like there's fertile ground here of, I've heard of people having stalkers. I don't picture JB Pritzker having a stalker. That is kind of what's wrinkling my brain for the moment. I'm not denying this happened. I'm simply saying the idea that JB Pritzker had a stalker is a little bit wrinkling my brain. Anybody have thoughts on that, or is it just me?
I mean, Deb Conroy had, I don't know if she had a stalker, but she had death threats, and not
But
someone
that's
you would-
different. Like, I'm sure Pritzker
Yeah.
gets threats and stuff, but I mean, like a stalker,
Yeah.
you don't see that usually. Usually, you see stalking cases are, I mean, unfortunately, tend to be like men stalking women that they find attractive,
Well,
or ex spouses stalking each other.
well,
Like, there's
and like a
there's
lot of
things I
times you see
see,
people with
but stalking
magnetic.
JB Pritzker, like he doesn't
Yeah.
seem stalkable.
I mean, like to your point, it's like he doesn't exactly have that magnetic personality that would attract some stalker like folks. It's like JB, you make fun
Is
of
it
his
crazy
toilets and
JB groupers? Are they throwing their beads up on stage after he gives a speech? You know, is he?
oh yes.
Is that where we're at
I would-
now? It's get to get in the rock star bus.
I get it. Like it's you're a politician, and as soon as something negative happens, like you have to like spin it politically. But it would maybe make sense to like let's wait a little bit and see if we can figure out who this guy was. Like obviously they know who the guy is, but it's not public knowledge. And what his motives were. I mean, he could have been somebody like stoned out of his mind and didn't even know whose house it was. I mean, you can't just say, "Oh, somebody threw rocks through Pritzker's window." It must be a Republican that did this. It's like the only option.
Listen, stop making me have to defend people I can't stand. They knew he was saying JB Pritzker is a mother blanker, and like no, he was not. He knew what he was doing. So, okay, we'll talk about the Republican angle in a second. No one wants to take the bait here. Like, I feel like there's some comedy gold here about JB Pritzker having a stalker. Not to make light. I'm not saying people should go stalk JB Pritzker, but there's got to be something funny here. Is it just me? Or are you guys just boring today?
You're looking for a fat joke here, Colin. I know that's what you're looking for.
It's not a fat joke. I'm happy to make JB Pritzker a fat joke.
Chris has to defend JB because he has to pretend like he's not related or he has no clue about this stalker guy, but he's being awfully suspicious over there. I wouldn't be surprised if Chris is next.
Oh,
What the
God.
hell are
Next
you
in line
talking
to
about?
be
I
stalker?
don't even know.
Where are you going with that? Where is your train of thought going with that, Mike?
I don't know. I feel like if there's anyone here on this call who would stalk JB Pritzker, it'd be someone like you, like sitting in the
Why?
bushes with the glasses.
Well,
No,
I'll say
no.
this: the stalking Pritzker thing, no, but like being the guy in the bushes with the binoculars, I can picture Chris doing that. So that I'll give you, man. Like,
I mean,
the
if I
cartoon
was
style,
JB,
not for real, but more like the cartoon style, where like suddenly you just see Chris's head pop out with the binoculars, and the camera turns around, and he's like staring into the local Italian beef place, and it's 4:45 a.m. They haven't opened yet, and he's waiting for them to open. Like, I think there's some fun there.
DeRay, the only stalker you need to worry about might be me outside of your house with a tire iron when you get up in the morning, because that's what you got to start worrying about if you keep going on these tangents about me being a creep or something like that, buddy.
Oh my God.
we'll see.
All
I look
right,
forward to seeing you.
This has
You
failed
should,
miserably in my attempt to get some humor and some fun into this episode. So shame on me for trying to have some fun. Let's get to the political topic of it, which is the other half of it. Yes, Pritzker decided, as he always does, that this is Republicans' fault. Let me the quote here: "The divisions in this country are being fomented by MAGA Republicans, led by Trump. That's why there's hatred." So this is all right. Listen, I understand he's a hyper-partisan, which is what Pritzker is, and people should start calling him the hyper-partisan that he is. Because every press conference, everything that happens, he wakes up and stubs his toes. He says, "Damn you Republicans, it's your fault." Like this guy is just wired to always blame Republicans. And yet, I'm old enough to remember when Illinois Democrats had a fundraiser where they had a guy impersonating Trump, and they all pretended to shoot him with an Uzi. I'm old enough to remember when national liberals held up Donald Trump with a bleeding head and cheered that let's chop his head off. Like, you want to say that it's MAGA Republicans calling for violence? Before January 6th, there were very few instances of conservatives fomenting violence. Yes, you can point to Jan 6, and that unfortunately eliminates a lot of our moral standing on this. And so as a result, you're not hearing me say it's all the Democrats. But prior to that, it almost was all the Democrats. Now, thanks to Jan 6, it's both of us. We both screw this up. But you don't get to turn around and say this is all Republicans. It's both sides. And to overlook the fact that there are plenty of Democrats, including Democrats in Illinois, who have fan the flames of violence in our political discourse, you are crazy. I remember Republican congressmen in the suburbs who had to wear bulletproof vests because far left groups were making threats. And in parades, they were not allowed by the Congressional Police or the Capitol Police or whoever covers that. They were not allowed to walk in parades without wearing a bulletproof vest because of the threats that were being made against them. Do not pretend like this is all conservatives, this is all MAGA Republicans, whatever BS you want to spin this as. This is both sides. And this is not me defending my side. You get me. I'm saying both sides. I'm not saying the left. I'm not blaming this on them. But don't you dare blame conservatives and Republicans when your side has fanned the flames of violence way more than conservatives and Republicans have. And you are one of the most partisan people on the planet. You don't get to pretend to be all bipartisan in this situation. You don't get to do it.
It's just like the same crap, different day with him. You know, he always uses, like you're saying, he just always uses Republicans as kind of like he just throws us in front of the bus every time so he doesn't have to answer questions about some of these things. But again, like this is one of those situations like there's no need to do it. Like I disagree with people using the Israel-Palestine situation politically. You can understand how people get there on some level. In this situation, like, yeah, you had a crazy guy stalk you. Like, you're just taking pot shots at Republicans just because you can. There's no need for it.
To be fair, 20 minutes ago, we were all saying how the Bost campaign should take this crisis and that crisis and use it for their own political opportunity. And the political operative in me would say J.B. Pritzker is just doing the same thing. As much as I don't think it's right morally, or maybe it's not in the best taste, he's going back to his message that Republicans are extreme, and he's not letting a crisis, no matter how small, or in his case, really, really big, go to waste. So is it really the worst political tactic? I don't know. Is it reprehensible? We could probably all agree yes.
Yeah, maybe good politics, fine. But you know what? You're the governor of Illinois, and somebody's got to hold you accountable. So that's what I'm going to do with my tiny, tiny platform. And others I know are working at it too. But you don't get to blame Republicans for this, not even one bit. I mean, when you got Hillary Clinton out there comparing Republicans and Trump supporters to Nazis, when you have, and saying we need to deprogram them, when you have, active shooters in situations, mass shootings who are far left, they're also ones who are far right. I get it. I'm not saying this is the problem of the left. I'm saying it's a problem with our society, but you should be up there blaming society. Pritzker has a platform where he could be telling both sides to stand down. He could be telling both sides to cut it out. But by making it partisan, he eliminates the ability to have any influence. If you actually want to make a difference, if you want to make a change, then use your platform to call out all violence, including amongst your own people. Instead, he's using it as a platform to further his political agenda and attack his political opponents. That's the big difference. So that's why I say you don't get to pretend to be bipartisan if you're not actually bipartisan, which is not what he's doing here. He's looking for political gain. So yeah, Matt, you're right. Good politics. Great. Yahoo. But if you actually want to be governor of one of the biggest states in the country, maybe, govern.
I guess that's the big dilemma for Republicans, and we tend to err more on the side of morality, and Democrats tend to side more on political gain. And that's the question every candidate has to ask themselves is like, what are we willing to do in order to win? What lines are we willing to cross? How much are we willing to go after our opponents? And I think Republicans tend to say we want to be true to our values, and Democrats tend to say we'll do whatever it takes. That's the conundrum of politics today.
Yeah, and listen, I'm all for the fight. I'm all for the fight during campaign season. You hear me talk about all the time that for Democrats, this is war, and Republicans play patty cake. I just said it a little bit ago at a training I was just doing. It drives me crazy, but that's in politics and campaign season. We're talking governing. We're talking every once in a while you have to step up and be a leader. And yeah, I get it. Me as a Republican saying this when DC Republicans can't figure out how to lead their way out of a cardboard box, unfortunately, is super hypocritical. But at certain points, you have to actually step up and lead. And when we're talking about violence in our politics, how many times have we called that out? I have a full video that I did, almost an hour long, on Live from the Lincoln Desk on this, calling out both sides, including my own people. I called out my own people in that video. We've done it in several episodes here. So we're practicing what we preach, where we say, both sides, cut it out. We did it last week or the week before. So we have a moral high ground to stand on this. You're the governor of the state. Maybe actually do something good and call out violence on both sides. Anyways, seems like I'm the only one honked off about this. You guys all good to move to the next topic? Maybe I'll find your passion on another topic. All right. I want to use this as a natural transition to a topic that was a little later in the agenda. So, Lane, I'm sorry, but we're going to go a little bit out of order because we're talking about this political divide. And there was an article in the Washington Post that's really relevant. We're going to talk about it later, but actually, I think it fits a lot better here, which is this idea, this research being put into this, and these thoughts that gerrymandering is a major factor that's widening the political divide in this country. They look at Illinois. There's been other studies that have looked at other states about how when you pack voters into specific districts in order to maximize your advantage, and both parties do it. Republicans do it, Democrats do it. So this is not me just attacking Democrats, but in this state, Democrats did it. And as a matter of fact, the research shows that the Illinois Democrat redistricting was the most effective in the country, tied with Texas. So Democrats in Illinois, Texans, Republicans in Texas were the top two at being effective gerrymanderers. So both sides have screwed this up, but we're in Illinois. So it's the Democrats who screwed this up in this state, where when you pack your conservative voters in a few districts and your liberal voters in other districts, what ends up happening is you get the most partisan people who will come out of those primaries who will then represent those districts. This is an obvious conclusion you can take from just the data, let alone your common sense, about how gerrymandering is significantly impacting this widening gap that we have in our politics, where what we see is these extreme, I hate using that word, these strong, very, very strong partisans on the left and the right coming out of the primaries, then winning the generals, and now representing us in DC or wherever it may be. And gerrymandering contributes to that significantly. So I thought it was a really interesting study. And I think that both parties do this, but here in Illinois, it's the Democrats who have done this. And it creates situations like the Mary Millers of the world, the Bost Bailey in this race to the right. These maps contribute to this and create these situations, just like they create these districts where Democrats, more moderate Democrats, Lipinski, Quigley, others get basically run out of the party for people who are more progressive. This is hurting us on both sides of the aisle. It's hurting our political discourse and our debate. Anybody have thoughts on this?
We talk about this all the time, where we not necessarily finding the farthest right or the moderate candidate, however you want to put it. We always talk about finding candidates that fit their district. So if if we're looking for candidates who fit their district in these very packed districts, whether it's very, very red or very blue, it's ultimately that's what's going to happen is you're going to get these environments that, become echo chambers. And so of course, a Mary Miller makes sense in our district because that's what that district is, and it's sort of like a self-fulfilling prophecy almost.
Yeah, totally.
I thought it was interesting. I saw this on Twitter. Our good friend Patrick Finkston at the Illinois was pointing this out. It was J.B. Pritzker's either current or former chief of staff was did a long thread about this article. Current. It was current. Okay, it was current chief of staff doing a long-winded thread about this article. It's like, well, Nikki Budzinski, she won a swing district. It's like, no, that's a D+11 district. It's not a swing district, my guy. Like, that's not how this works. But I will say this. While I do think gerrymandering is a lot of this, especially in this state. I mean, Republicans are just never gonna. The way the maps are drawn, it makes it very difficult for Republicans to win in this state. But I do think there is a lot of this problem is just general polarization on both sides of the political aisle. I mean, even in districts across the country where there are more swingy districts, you do have hyperpartisans just winning those districts as a result of waves and just polarization of the party. One year the hyperpartisan Democrat gets in there, and the next year the Republicans come back and a hyperpartisan Republican gets in there. There's no moderates on really either side of the aisle anymore. So while gerrymandering, I think, is it pushed this to extremes on either side of it, a lot of this is just polarization of the parties. There are no more moderates. There are no more free thinkers in either caucuses.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, this is not me claiming that all of the this pushing both parties to the edges of their tents instead of the balance of their tents, if you will, is all based on redistricting. It's not. To your point, Chris, there's a lot of factors, but certainly this is one of the factors. And you know what? We ask, how can we fix this? How can we address this challenge? Let's look at redistricting. Let's look at that. And you've got a situation where you could be instituting fair maps. And we talked about fair maps. We had several movements to get fair maps passed in the state of Illinois. If you want to address this problem, again, we talk about what do we do about extremism in politics, and it's really hard to come up with solutions. Here's a pretty dang obvious one. Like, a politician shouldn't be picking their voters. You shouldn't be packing specific subgroups and partisan groups into certain districts. This is common sense. This is a good government reform that we could agree on if we actually care about good government. And you could maybe have an impact on this problem of this push to extremism in our politics and hyperpartisanship in our politics. Here's a way we could do something about it. So this is my point is, hey, if this is a big problem, we all agree this is a big problem, here's something you can do. And the angle for Illinois, let's make that soft transition. The angle here for Illinois is that J.B. Pritzker claimed that he was going to support fair maps. He said that he would support it when he ran for office. None of us were shocked when he didn't support it, when he was actually in office. And what I thought was really interesting is when this article came out and Pritzker was asked about it, I love when you read into past the first couple sentences of a quote and you start to get to when they're getting on a roll. This is why we teach candidates, don't go past the first couple sentences. When you start rolling, you start to say things that are related to the question, but are things you never were supposed to say out loud. And Pritzker did that in this, where there was a quote in there where he said, if you're going to solve redistricting and the problem of redistricting, you have to do it at the national level. It can't be done by the state. He's not wrong, because you can't have, like, Republicans in Texas aren't going to agree to give up the power of redistricting if Illinois Democrats don't agree too. So I'm not saying that he's wrong in his quote. What I am saying is, from that sentence, within the context of the quote, it's clear to me J.B. Pritzker was never, ever, ever going to support fair maps. And we talk about how he flip-flopped. There was no flip-flop. He just flat out lied when he said he was going to support fair maps. And that sentence, that quote to me proves it, that he always knew the political calculation. And listen, I assume that to be the case back when he said it, that, he's just saying it. There's no way he's going to support fair maps. So I'm not saying we didn't kind of know he was lying back then, but I'm saying here is him proving that he's always known this political calculus of we're never going to back fair maps in the state, because if we do, we're screwing Democrats across the country. This has always been in Pritzker's mind. And so this is proof that when J.B. Pritzker said he was going to back fair maps during the campaign, it was a flat out lie.
I mean, at least he admitted he was lying. I mean, that's refreshing. But I think we all sort of thought the same thing when we all saw that map process play out. Like, there's nothing about that was fair. There's nothing about those maps at any point that looked like they were gonna be even. Like, this is just kind of a capstone on a process that was a sham from the beginning and politically motivated.
And they weren't transparent, when they were passing them, and it was all these, it's in this locked room and you can't see it, and maybe we'll let you see it later. And it was just a sham from the beginning. Like, it's, good talking point when you're running for governor, but then once you get in there and you've got the power, well, why the heck would you do that? I mean, it's just like handicapping yourself or giving the Republicans a few more districts. But yeah, look at aisle 13, most gerrymandered in the country.
And listen, I'm not saying that if he just been upfront and honest and said, hey, listen, it's just not an issue I'm going to touch. Okay, great. I get it. Because if Republicans get control down in Springfield, do you really think that we're going to give up the power of the maps if we finally get a chance to draw maps in some capacity? Heck no, we're not going to give up that power. So this is politics. I get it. There needs to be a national solution. I get it. But you know what? J.B. Pritzker has a history of, it's clear he just says whatever he has to say, whether it's true or not, and this is just another proof of it. And so I found that pretty interesting to have yet another case where we have proof of it. All right, let's keep moving here. We are steaming to the end of the episode. This is what we were going to cover earlier, but now we're going to do it a little out of order. Oliver, I know you've heard that Jeanne Ives is planning a potential referendum in Illinois in 2024. What are you hearing?
So she was talking about this last night at one of our township meetings. So basically the referendum would require it. So like if you're in a school and your kid, the kid who's under 18, they want, gender affirming, treatment of medical treatment of any kind, that parents they have to be informed about what's going on. Because I guess there's been some situations locally where some of the stuff has been happening without the parents' knowledge, and it's become this whole fire keg locally. So regardless of how you feel about any of those issues, I think it brings up two good two good talking points. So is that concept of does it using a ballot initiative to bring your voters to the polls? So, we saw Amendment 1 last cycle. We saw the Democrats exploring, something with the abortion issue this cycle. So maybe this is one of the plays that she's exploring. Also, I think if that is the case, we've been, saw parents during COVID, they were really gravitating towards some of these issues that Republicans were talking about. But their focus is really on the schools, which we need people focused on what's going on in our schools. But how do we translate that to them voting Republican? So is this something that's going to translate, okay, so, it's going to get them engaged in the Republican Party. So I'm curious to hear everyone else's thoughts, but I just thought it was an interesting interesting thing to bring up for this election cycle.
I just feel like if you're going to do something referendum related, it has to be something that will like maintain like some sort of traction for, we're 13 months from election day. Like you have to have something that's lasting and will continue to be impactful and continue to be a topic, especially if we're not going to have the resources to promote this, and that the liberals will have a lot of resources to tell people to vote no, and extremist Republicans and, those kind of things, that we're bigots and all that stuff. I think there's a lot of other issues that you could write a referendum or a constitutional amendment on, like maybe something related to our sanctuary state status or something. There's a bunch of other things I feel like we could do that would probably have legs for a longer amount of time and more people would be on our side.
Are you a leg man, Michael? You just want things with legs?
Yeah. Issues. Let's keep it going.
I think it's an interesting concept, even if it's just on the issue itself, because polling in recent months and all through last year has shown that the American public is more and more on the conservative side, on the trans issue, especially in relation towards kids under the age of 18. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's a mandate for something like this, at least in polling. The issue is going to be what Butler just said, because the Democrats are just going to have all this money behind it, and they're going to paint Republicans as extremists, and the other side of this issue is going to be, you're a bigot, you're anti-LGBT, trans rights, all this stuff. So I like the concept, I support the endeavor, but I'd like to see money, and I don't really know where it's going, because it's not going to drive anybody out to the polls on our side. Like, nobody's going to go to the polls because this amendment's going to be on the ballot. I don't think this is that.
Maybe we could do something Second Amendment related. That would be probably good.
We get destroyed.
Those people are already going to vote.
Wrong answer. Nope.
One thing about this.
Safety related, maybe, or related to prosecuting criminals, that could work. But they're not touching guns.
It would be interesting to see what the target audience for this would be. And off the top of my head, I would just assume that it would be mothers, maybe fathers, but definitely a mother type. And I don't know if they would be more likely to come out and vote, but I think that it'd be interesting to see how that would affect turnout, because I don't see a lot of people coming out and voting against this. Maybe this is going to bring out some, if it's well funded and if there's some publicity for it, maybe it would bring out some mothers or fathers who wouldn't be likely to vote, and they'll come out and vote for this. I'm not sure. We'll see. But I do see that there is some strategic thinking behind it.
Well, yeah, that's my point to raise. Like, I think the concept of like, okay, is this going to engage parents that were engaged during a lot of these issues during COVID and in the schools? I mean, who knows if it plays out this way, or if it plays out more towards where Butler's saying, where people are just going to call us, X, Y, or Z, So I think it's an interesting angle to approach voter turnout.
Listen, I can see the thought process. I can see how we can go from, because there was a lot of frustration in 23, which we're in that year, but the election of 2023, as we ramped up to that, there was a lot of hope that everything going on, thanks to COVID, which made parents pay attention and got people to show up to school boards and actually pay attention, that was going to lead to this big outpouring of school board candidates. And it wasn't just Illinois, it was across the country. It didn't. There are some areas where it did lead to some candidates, but the expectation was that this was going to lead to droves of people getting involved and running for school board and running for office. And that just isn't what happened. And so there's a natural then follow-up progression of, okay, people are honked off, but they're not getting involved in the political process. How do we bridge that gap? And so maybe, just maybe, this is an effort towards that. And so I can see the logic, the concept. The question is, does it work? So for a referendum to do something beneficial, it has to do one of two things. It either has to drive turnout that will help you, or it needs to put an issue in the news that will put you in a better light, drive a wedge called wedge politics. We can talk about that, in trainings. But the idea is that it puts you on the right side of the majority, a significant majority, a 70-30 or better majority. That's what you're looking for. I don't know that this is a 70 or 30 thing. I mean, when you look at the libraries and books in schools, and the right to maybe have your kindergartners or your kindergartners through third graders, where those books have to be in a special section of the library. There's a lot of ways you could have maybe engaged within the schools, other than D211, which this controversy was years ago, and it would lasted for a couple of years, but it's kind of died down now. The whole sort of trans rights in schools and trans issues in schools is not a big topic right now. And so I don't know how people will connect this to things that are relevant and current. And the thing running into that Jeanne and others run into in this process is the Illinois law is very specific that if you want an amendment to the Constitution to be constitutional, it has to touch on a single issue. And so you can't have this sort of parental bill of rights, that you just say it'll do these 7 things. That could be sexy. That could be great. That could drive votes. It's certainly for sure not constitutional. And so the way that law is written in Illinois really does constrict your ability to come up with something that could really drive votes and be balanced enough to really work for you. So it is a struggle. I don't have a lot of fully formed thoughts on this. It's brand new. Today's is the first I'm hearing of it. I can see some thought going into it. I like that people are thinking and trying to be creative. So I do love that part of it. Is this the thing? I don't know. I'm not super convinced that it is, but I'm also not convinced that it isn't. I'd love to see some numbers on it. If they do indeed move this forward, maybe we include this on one of our future polls just to see what people think about it. I don't know, but it's definitely worth keeping an eye on.
Yeah, no, once
to be
I
pessimistic, I'll be pessimistic, then you can say something positive. It could also just be a way to stay relevant and raise some money, but all right. That's that.
I didn't say it, but we'll see what the ballot language looks like, and maybe it'll be a bit more nuanced, but I think it's an interesting topic to follow, and I'm sure more to come.
Yeah. All right. We're steaming towards the end. Let's get to some of our quick hits at the end. Chris, honestly, the thing that I hate about these episodes now is on our Friday calls, because you can share more info than we can share here in a public podcast. I get weekly updates on corruption and criminal trials and people going to jail. I don't get that as often anymore. It makes me sad, but you have an update here. I'm excited. So who's the latest one going to jail?
So Stephen Weiss, Joe Berrios' son-in-law, he has been
James Weiss.
James Weiss. I don't know why. Stephen Weiss is a hockey player. That's who I'm thinking of. Or was a hockey player. He's not in the NHL anymore. But James Weiss, son-in-law to Joe Berrios, has been sentenced as part of the bribery and everything, that case that went down a few months ago. He got 5.5 years. Around 5 years seems to be the going rate for a lot of these Illinois corruption trials. Pat Doherty got 5 years a few months ago when he got sentenced. So 5.5 years is pretty standard. We know how this sentencing goes. He probably serves 2, if that. This is how system works for white collar criminals. But it's another someone connected to Illinois Democrats going to jail. So we'll see what happens there. This isn't really a trial I followed very closely, but it's interesting. It's Joe Berrios' son-in-law.
Well, I just love the quote. I mean, some of these judges have given us some amazing quotes on corruption as they've gone through these trials. And the judge in this case said, Mr. Weiss, you added another star to Chicago's walk of shame on the sidewalk of corruption. That's a pretty strong and solid quote. I'm actually a little jealous that I didn't write that somewhere. That's a A+ quote for the judge. So kudos to the judge on that one.
If you recall, I proposed a new state flag a month or so ago where I talk about adding stars to the flag every time someone gets convicted for corruption. So I would just like to take credit for the idea first.
That's listen, kudos to you, the politician, for taking credit for something you had nothing to do with. But that's a kind of a lift to find a way those two things connect.
Hey, I got to work my angles
on her part. We're gonna run out of space. on the
Yeah,
flag.
right. It'll be just a flag of a bunch of
Maybe you can
lines.
sell like Velcro like extensions or something, so you just keep making it
The flag can keep getting
longer, you
bigger.
know?
So eventually it's not a flag. It's like those giant banners that the planes will pull behind them that you can put messages on. That's actually our flag at some point.
Yeah, I think so. That sounds about right. Could work.
I Googled it to make sure I gave the judge kudos by name. So U.S. District Judge Stephen Seeger is the judge that I'm giving kudos to. So I figure I should put a name to the quote. All right, couple last quick things here. Oliver, I know House District 45, which is a tier 1 district. It's a big hope for a flip for us. Looks like HRO has their candidate. What are you hearing?
Yeah, so we've been begging and pleading for months for a candidate in this race, and so now we have two potential candidates. So HRO is backing Dan Kordik. He's been involved in the Elmhurst area, York Township politics for a long time. He recently ran for county board, so he's the HRO guy. I also know that Dennis Rebeletti, he's the current Addison Township supervisor, former state rep. He ran for state senate last cycle as well against Susie Glowiak Hilton. He's circulating petitions as well. Again, these folks have both been involved in DuPage politics a long time, so I think it's interesting that HRO is choosing to back Dan, but we'll see how it turns out.
Yeah, and Rebeletti served in the House too. I mean, he's
Yeah.
been in office for a good period of time. Interesting that HRO's pick sides. Kordik, both of them have challenges that they're going to face in this race, and if it ends up being an actual race, it certainly could get pretty big challenge, pretty bloody, pretty fast.
Well,
What happened to HRO staying neutral? I thought that was like the whole thing they were going to change.
This version of HRO never made that promise, and it's not been the way they've acted.
Well, and it's definitely an interesting study. So Dan Kordik's from York Township and Dennis is from Addison Township. And, they both have solid bases in both of those townships. And I think it will be an interesting kind of, where people land and how some of that, if there's any inter-party fighting as a result.
Yeah.
Because they're both
for
two
sure.
strong groups. So
Yeah, and especially, I mean, Lane started to pull up those maps as we talk about these districts, so you can see just how this definitely will become a geographical race. If it does indeed become a race, I mean, sounds like HRO is trying to clear the field here, but so far it hasn't happened. So we'll see what happens there.
Yep.
But it's going to be. I mean, we're ending up with a lot of primaries, it seems, coming up, and some that have potential to be, pretty bloody and challenging. So here's hoping we can avoid some of that. Here's hoping we can avoid tearing our own party apart in March, so we can, win in November. But we'll certainly keep an eye on that race. All right. I know we also have a challenger who's emerged against Delia Ramirez, which IL3 isn't a district in play on paper. I want to make that clear, but it is one that I watch very closely simply because if Illinois is going to turn, it's going to be on Hispanics turning or Latinos turning from voting Democrat to voting Republican, especially as you look at the census numbers with young voters, or I'm sorry, with rural voters leaving, with Black residents, Black voters leaving at a significant margin, and more Hispanic demographics coming to the state. The demographics in the state are going to really get even more Hispanic, Latino heavy. And so if we're ever going to win the state on the Republican side, that's going to be it. That's going to be our only path to victory. We've talked about this a lot in the 22 episodes that we've done about how there are openings for us. And Delia Ramirez being the far left progressive that she is, the outspoken, unashamed far left progressive. We saw it in her last race. We've seen it in a lot of the politics since then. That Hispanic turnout has not been great because a lot of her Hispanic voters don't actually agree with her position. So her having a challenger, even though that may not be a district that we can flip, is a great thing for the party. So tell us more about what's going on in IL3.
Yeah, so if we're speaking of gerrymandering, this is probably one of the craziest gerrymandering jobs in Illinois. It goes all the way out to Dundee, all the way out to Humboldt Park in the city. So it's a crazy district, but it's one of the two Hispanic districts they created last cycle. John Boris, he's from Homer Glen, and I guess he's moving into the district to run for this race, but former police officer, was involved with the Young Republicans. He, seems like a nice guy. I don't know too much about him. Just met him last night, but I think they'll have an uphill climb. The district's challenging to begin with. And then also,
That's-
you know, I think when you're not a member of that community, like, and you're coming in to run for office, I think it always, you know, it's always an interesting case of how people are going to respond to that. You know, again, nice guy, but you know, when you don't live in the community you're running for, or you're just moving in, I think, you know, there's, you know, it'll be interesting to see how people react to that.
Yeah,
Hey,
listen,
it works
again,
for
I made the
Nikki
point
Budzinski.
real quick.
Keep
I made the
moving.
point earlier, but it's important to give the numbers. That's a D34 district. Republicans are
Yeah.
not winning all 34. But
Correct.
you got to know, when you dig down in those numbers, there was a 6% swing to Republicans amongst Hispanic voters from that community specifically. 6% among Hispanic voters just in aisle 3. And so when we're talking about this movement, this trend that Republicans need to make sure we're fostering, you're seeing it. That district was the second highest Hispanic impact behind aisle 4, where you saw this sort of movement towards Republicans in the overall numbers because of low turnout amongst Hispanics and some Hispanics starting to change their votes. So that's why aisle 3 is important for Republicans, not because we can win. We can't win that district. You could run the greatest candidate in the world and give them $10 million, and they're still not going to win aisle 3. So I just want to make that very clear to our listeners and watchers.
I would like to clarify something. It's not necessarily gerrymandered. It's part of the Voting Rights Act, and the Hispanics probably deserved another Hispanic influence congressional district. So I wouldn't call it gerrymandered. But the thing that bites me on this is the
So
guy lives in
PC, Chris. Wow.
whatever.
It's the Democrat in him coming out.
I
mean-
I've read the Voting Rights Act. I know what it says. Anywho,
Listen,
You and your
you're actually
rights.
you're both right. So, but let's move on to the meat of it.
Anywho, I found it interesting. The guy lives in Homer Glen, and he's moving to aisle 3 to run for this race. I'm pretty sure we don't have anybody in the 1st congressional district yet where Homer Glen is located. So if he was going to run to be cannon fodder in a congressional race, why wouldn't he just run in the 1st against Jonathan Jackson? Why is he going to move to the 3rd to run against Delia Ramirez? I don't know. Maybe this is just another one of those Val hate to sell jobs where he tells them, hey, if you move to Wheaton, you might be able to win the 3rd instead of the 1st. And it's like one of those things. So I don't know. Maybe.
I mean, the 1st is a D36 district. The 3rd is a D34. They're really not different. So you're
Hey,
making
3
a valid
points.
point.
You never know. Or 2 points. You never know.
Trust
Well, maybe
the
he's
plan.
running there. I don't know where that district is, and I don't know where he's moving to, but maybe he's running this time so he can make a name for himself and run for something else down the line, like a state house or state senate or even a mayor or something. I don't know.
DeRay is a ray of sunshine today. Matt, you are Matty Nice.
That's
today.
me.
Matty Nice, man. You are just one cute little happy, nice dude. I'm impressed and also a little concerned at what's going on with you. All right, for time, let me move us to our last thing. I know we are over, though I will say that we've gotten a lot of feedback from people after last week's episode that they like all the information and they'd be okay with if we went 2 hours. Now, my political team would kill me if we did that, and Lane would kill me if we did that. So that ain't going to happen. But I do appreciate the feedback. We will still try to keep this to an hour, but on weeks where we have a ton to cover like this, we'll go a couple minutes over and not quite feel so bad about it. But last topic, because I do know actually some of our political team members need to run, is last Saturday. We're recording this on Thursday. So this previous Saturday, the petition process began for candidates who are running for delegate for Republican presidential campaigns. And for our watchers, we are the people who digest this information we put out aren't amateurs. They're kind of the next level above. So I think you all know what that means. I'm not going to go into an explanation yet again about what that means. But the point is here that the process has begun for delegate signature gathering on their petitions for the presidential race. And so far, it seems like the campaign that has it the most together is the DeSantis campaign. We've been talking about how they've been struggling a little bit to finalize that list. We heard they were doing great, just needed a few more, doing better, it seems, than most of the other candidates. Well, now they're the last one to announce they've filled out their slate. They've got all their candidates out there passing petitions, and they've got some pretty decently big names that are running as delegates within the slate that they have. So kudos to them. Anybody have any thoughts on either them being the first to announce and get their act together, or some of the names that they've been able to convince to be delegates? Any thoughts on this as we close out?
Well, it makes sense to me because a lot of the party infrastructure is going to look at Ron DeSantis like, ooh, it's not Trump, so I can't get in trouble with that, but it's Ron DeSantis. So some people like Ron DeSantis. So it makes sense why Ron DeSantis will get like a lot of the party establishment people to become delegates for him, all that stuff. But let's not get beyond anything. The Trump delegates will rule the day.
Well, as long as he can find them enough to put one in every single congressional district, or 3.
I do know that some of the other presidential campaigns are still struggling to find people.
Who
Yeah, I
wants
mean,
to be a delegate for Tim
it came,
Scott?
the list, the party kind of made inter-party to some of their party leaders. They kind of passed around who's the contact information for each of the campaigns, which is a helpful thing for the party to do. And just looking at the list of names of like who's the campaign contact, the DeSantis campaign is a well-known person there. A lady we all know and like, who we've worked together a few times, who's super passionate, and she's a great lady. She's the DeSantis campaign lead. Most of the other campaigns, I looked at the list, I'm like, I don't know who these people are. You're the point of contact for a presidential candidate in Illinois, and none of us know who the heck you are. That's not a good sign. All right, I know everybody's keeping quiet because most of you have to go. So let's close with that. Next week, we are going to be covering campaign finance reports. There are, if you don't know how this works, every quarter, every candidate has to file what they've raised and what they've spent. And those all have to be done this quarter by October 15th. So we're going to have all that data available for us as we record. Those will be 16th this month because the 15th is a Sunday. So if you're the one who has to file that report, you have till the 16th this time, not the 15th, because the 15th is a Sunday. Anyways, we're going to have a ton of information on that because we're going to tell you which campaigns are raising, which campaigns aren't, who's got too high of a burn rate, who doesn't have enough of a team to win. We're going to have a lot of analysis based on those reports next week. And so you definitely don't want to miss that. Anyone, as you close, want to spot out something that you saw in those, because some people are announcing the numbers ahead of time. Anything you want to say, oh yeah, I heard X. So next week I'm going to be talking about that a lot. Who's got something?
The one
Mike
thing that I
Hastings is
thought
getting
was
money.
interesting. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Chris.
Mike Hastings is getting money. He got like $110,000 just earlier this week from a couple labor unions. So he's gonna have money again, and it's not gonna be easy. So yeah.
I just kind of did like the quick math because Kevin Schmidt has already filed his report. He raised about $18,000, which is a big step in the right direction. And then I kind of did some math based on what Latoya had reported on the A1s, and she was at around 13.5. So unless she has a lot of small dollar,
That's bad.
Kevin might have more than her.
That's bad. I mean, Kevin needs to up his numbers, but going from, I think, 0 or close to 0 to that, I'll take it. It's progress.
Yeah.
Toya should be way higher than that. So let's make sure we talk about that next week. Anyone else have things that they have already heard that have stood out to them? I mean, I know Foster's opponent getting over 300K is a pretty big deal. Not enough yet to make Foster in trouble, but enough to at least make it a race. All right,
Bost
let's close with
campaign,
that.
another record, so that's good to see.
You saw, I figured you'd be talking about that. All right, let's close this out. Thank you guys. Let me go backwards here. Michael, Matt, Chris, Abby, thank you guys for joining us. It's been a great episode. Next week, we're going to get a lot of analysis, so don't miss it. Special thanks to Lane Davis, our producer. We will catch you on the 23rd episode, the Michael Jordan episode. So I'm expecting greatness from you guys next week on the greatest episode that we're going to have. So make sure you guys deliver and make sure you guys watch.